Sony Music, and Warner Music. For writers, there's been a number of publications that have distributions to large audiences. That's the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the New Yorker. In film, it's been the movie studios. The net result has been that these industries have remained very small when you compare the talent in the world to the actual number of people who work in the field. Even worse, if you happen to be the one in a million talent, you generally own very little of your work. And you do not have the opportunity to create dramatic economic change in your community. I get very sensitive about this when this one's very close to my heart, because African Americans not only participate in the creative field at a high rate, but dominate creative industries such as music and dance. Change is on the horizon. Today, we're going to talk to a few CEOs who are building the world where creatives become owners. And the only requirement for earning a living by sharing your God-given talent is that you garner 1,000 fans consistently. So tonight's topic is the U creative economy, the new creative economy. Joining us is Ben from Caffeine and Fiona from Substack, and also my brother Steve Stoute from United Masters. And a big thank you to my husband, Ben Horowitz, for helping me moderate this conversation. So Ben, do you want to kick it off first?
Sure. Let's start with Fiona. And Fiona, Substack has been quickly become a phenomenon among writers. And one of the things that I think has really taken the industry's attention and made everybody very excited or very nervous is not only do you have young up and coming writers going to Substack, but writers who people would kind of have considered made men, people like Andrew Sullivan and Matt Taibbi. What's going on with Substack? How is that happening? Why are writers running to the platform? What is the proposition?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad to kick it off. So first off, just to kind of set the context on Substack, in case anyone doesn't know. So it's a platform for writers to publish independently. And on Substack, so writers own their own work and they own their relationship with their audience. And readers can subscribe directly to those writers that they trust and that they value and support them directly through paid subscriptions. So there's no middleman here. Like Felicia was saying, there's no gatekeepers in this model, and anyone can get started and anyone can charge for subscription. It's really about that direct relationship. And so what's interesting about that, if you play it out, is yes, really, really popular voices across any topic can come onto Substack straight away and garner an audience and start kind of building a media company or a publication of their own. And emerging voices who maybe are just starting their writing career or their artistic career can also get started and begin to build that sort of following and sort of that creative endeavor right on Substack.
And so what is the big attraction? Why are people coming so fast over to the platform? Because I think it surprised even you guys.
Yeah, that's true. I think, one thing I'd say about it is just sort of what we've been used to on the internet for a long time, which is that writing has been free and it's been supported by advertising. And it's been supported in part also by the sort of clicks and engagement that articles get. And in turn, that doesn't really reward the writers behind it. And, this, particularly, I think we've seen this during COVID, which is there's been layoffs. It's been really hard for journalists to necessarily make a living here in this model. And with Substack and with sort of the subscription model, what's possible is that readers can support and fund the writers that they trust, the writers that they value. And that relationship is actually one that can kind of have a lot of interesting topics begin to flourish. And I think that's a big part of it.
All right, great. And let me quick move over to Ben. Ben, you're building a platform that helps people who are kind of building not only creatives in existing art forms, but you've got kind of your biggest set of creatives are from an underground art form called the Ultimate Rap League. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about what on the platform facilitates that and what you've got going over at Caffeine.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a platform that allows anybody to come and create new social interactive broadcasts. Tends to be a lot of video gaming, but way beyond video gaming is kind of what I think most people know us for. But sort of the lure that sort of brings a lot of people in is the fact that we also have a studio in LA, which can partner up with folks like our premium partner, Ultimate Rap League, and help them sort of take something that might have traditionally been, live streamed in their app or on YouTube or somewhere, and really take it to a whole new level, make it interactive, make it social, make it like hyper engaging, introduce new ways for them to make money. The kinds of things you might have expected a big TV broadcasting studio to do in the past, we can do in a much more direct, lightweight way. And so Bees is actually here on the call today with us. He's one of the key guys at URL Ultimate Rap League. And we've been on a real journey together this year and really grown their audience significantly using our distribution platform and studio. It's been really exciting.
All right, great. And then let me get to Steve. So Steve, you spent a long time in the traditional music industry before founding United Masters. And maybe you could take us through kind of what you saw in the music industry, what that meant for artists, and kind of the money left on the table by artists that motivated you to start United Masters, and then tell us a little bit about the new model and how people can own their own work.
Okay. Yeah. So, coming up in the record business, you didn't even realize the level of usury of the contracts. You were just happy to get a record deal. And this was something that was omnipresent, no matter where you go. Particularly, I came up in rap music, the artists just wanted deals and they would offer you points. And, somebody got 12 points or somebody got 16 points. You were arguing over 12 and 16 points and negotiating against that. But the benchmark of what a good deal was so low that everybody was fighting for more pennies versus the true impact of what their contribution was and what they should have been getting the entire time. And I've seen that it was this constant, you walk around and you're super famous, you walk around and there's crowds of people around you and you keep hearing that you're selling records, but yet you had no idea, or you never had the money that was equated to your fame. And because hip hop was such a emerging art form, you really felt it from ground zero, because you were like, last week I was nobody. A month later, so many people know me. 6 months later, much more people know me around the country, and yet my money ain't right. Something must be wrong. But everybody was so either ashamed to bring it up or not sure what possibly could be wrong. Maybe that was just the economics you had to accept, that you started to see that just seeping in for many, many, many years. And probably the biggest thing, eye-opening thing for me was this whole idea of when I started to understand the terms of recoupment. As Nas's manager, when I started to see how they recouped, this was during the time that, let me just put it in plain terms, MTV dominated, music video dominated attention and the ability for you to move units. If you got on TRL or whatever, you became much more of a household name through that vehicle. Well, video prices were going through the roof, and to get a video that mattered, you had guys, Busta Rhymes and Missy Elliott and Puffy and all these guys spending, a mill ticket, $1 million on a video. But yet in record company contracts, they would cap the recoupment at $250,000. So you'd be encouraged to make $1 million video, but at $250,000, this was particular to Sony Music, the artist would recoup $125,000 out of their share. The record company recoups $125,000 out of their larger share, up to $250,000, and then everything over $250,000, the artist had to eat 100% of. So the artist is getting the smaller amount and absorbing the most cost. And it was during that time that I realized this is really, really bad. And it stuck with me. So what I wanted to do, and with the help of many people who supported me, was shift the economics around so that the artists got a lion's share of the revenue. And whether the model was, 90-10 or 95-5 or whatever it was, you wanted to shift the economics so that the artists got the money, and that us as the distributor who would help them get on the streaming platforms would get a share that we could operate a business and not lose money, but that the value would shift to its rightful owner. And the record business, I'll add here, I'll sum this up. The mentality is so poor and so locked in at the time when I started United Masters to the legacy rules that people who were at record companies literally said that you would fail. They thought I would fail. They've seen this idea before. Independent record companies never make it. Independent ideas like this, taking on the big labels, always fail for whatever reason. And they bet that I would fail. And the truth of the matter is that the artists and the audience has spoken and said, we love independent artists. We don't care what label you're on. We actually support the fact that an artist can make it on their own. And like there's a lot of good examples of this, but I'm proud to have Toby on, who's been an unbelievable prime example of an artist who, as an entrepreneur, took advantage of this economic shift and has done quite well for himself in the process.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Steve. I'm sorry, Ben, but I am a huge fan of Toby. So I want to thank you for joining, Steve, and thank you also, Toby, for joining the conversation. I want to direct a quick question to Toby. Toby, are you there? Toby, you got to.
Yep,
Hey, brother,
yep.
I am a huge fan. Thank you for joining the platform for the conversation. So my question to you is, I'm a big fan of United Masters as well. So as an up-and-coming artist, and you are an amazing artist, I love your work. How do you think about ownership of your own art? And how does United Masters help you with that and like other things?
Well, first and foremost, let me just say it's an honor to be on the call with, you know what I'm saying, such monumental people, little old me. You know what I'm saying? But
you are no little old you. We all love you on this platform.
I truly appreciate it. But just as it relates to independence and ownership, for me, it's everything. But it's only everything for me because I'm one of the people who's not scared of hard work, and I have a vision for specifically what I want to do. I always tell Steve tell everybody, look, everybody, you should all own your stuff. You should all be independent. I'm like right there, like dead neutral in the middle, where listen, if you got a vision and you know what you want to do, you should own your stuff, and you should not sign a no record deal or do any of that type of stuff. But if you don't, it ain't really for everybody. This is for the real, like for real entrepreneurs, not just artists, or you got to be for real entrepreneur if you're thinking ownership and that type of stuff. But for somebody like me and the movement that we've been allowed to do through the people, it's everything, and it's I feel like I had the absolute best situation, period.
Ben?
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Oh, they're going to be in. Okay.
Yeah. No, E40, do you have a question for Stoute or Ben?
Yeah, I was going back to it. What's up, Ben? What's happening?
What's happening for you?
You got it. I was just listening to Steve when he was mentioning, the videos, and how to recoup it and whatnot, and how the labels recoup it. He is telling 100% the truth. And Steve, you remember also back in the days they had the directors that get kickback. You remember that, Steve? Steve still on there?
I can't tell you I knew the directors were getting
What'd you say?
Kickbacks. But what I could tell you was that I knew that
The producers. So
I
check
couldn't
it out.
tell you
It
that I
was
knew the directors were getting kickbacks. But what I do know,
go ahead.
Steve, we can't hear you. Paul.
So
no,
so let me
I'm right. Yeah, I can hear
so
you.
let me tell you what I meant by that. I'm talking about not the record label. I'm talking about it would be a director that will be the producer at the same time as well. You feel what I'm saying? And sometimes things can inflate the costs. You look at your statements, and I know this being in the business 32 years. You look at your statement, and be like, hold on, I didn't spend that. Where that come from? Oh, we took somebody out to dinner, this, that, and the third. You feel me? So it's
Listen,
many things we could talk about, but go ahead.
by the way, I can get into it, E40. I can get into the depths of this. The stealing has been so fundamental to the profit center of the business that for people who are not in the record industry, when I tell you some of it, you'd probably want to say, well, why did people ever sign record deals and why aren't these guys in jail? I'll give you something else. Typical and standard record companies, not an exception, just like very typical, is they would pay you based off of 90% of sales. They wouldn't pay you off 100%. So you'd be getting a 15%, 14% of 90%, not off 100%. Why 90? They had in these clauses this thing called breakage. Breakage was that when you're shipping CDs or shipping vinyls and tapes, that these things would break. They would be unoperable, so they would damage goods. But they predetermined this number without ever actually doing an accounting for it. So they basically predicted that 10% of it would be broken. That was one thing they did. The other thing they did was the record companies would have cleans. Cleans are promotional copies. So you work at a major, you're an artist signed to a major record company, and the record company guys would print, 1 million albums. The promotion people typically would be able to take some versions of it that were clean, and they'd punch like holes in it, like a little hole in the left-hand corner, and they'd give it to DJs, and it'd be promotion so they could, get a sample of the album prior, to it being released or whatever. But what was happening was there was no cap on the amount of cleans that internally can be ordered. So you had promotion people around the country that was working for these record companies or independently part of these companies that were ordering these cleans and selling them. Of course, you didn't need them. Not typically, you didn't need them for all artists, but they'd order them, 50 boxes of them, say they was giving them out, and then sell them to like car washes. There was an entire tier of the industry called rack jobbers. Rack jobbers was a distribution tier that would take cleans, and you'd see them at your local car wash, you'd see them in a B store, and they'd buy the cleans for $5 each. So the artists were selling all these records, but they never got, 10% of it was taken off the top, and there was a bunch of it that was ordered as cleans, and the record company folks were selling it on their own.
Yeah, and it'll come out your reserves too, off top.
Yeah, let me add one thing to that will freak people out, because I think, Steve, you told me this. When they went to streaming, they kept the breakage fee in. Like the streams broke.
Yeah. Breakage fees stayed all the way through when iTunes started. They kept it in there. What happened was it was a shoot first, ask questions later mentality. They got away with it as long as they could until some manager or somebody said, well, why is it still in there beforehand? Now, and just here goes the real racket. And anybody who's seen Unforgiven, the Dave Chappelle 18-minute bit, he talks about this. The lawyers are in on it. Very, very few lawyers are not in on this racket. So, like, no matter where you go, you're going into the family of legacy record companies with all the industry lawyers and all the industry accountants, and it's one happy family, and they wink at each other because they realize that we artists, and I'm not even going to say black artists, but artists overall, were being used because they have no understanding of the true economic stack that they provide. Never got it. And we at United Masters, with the help of Toby and 700,000 other artists who are on the platform, are chipping away at this. And we have a long way to go. This is early innings of this idea, early innings of people believing this. But I believe the next generation of artists will not sign record companies sign to record companies any longer.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, in it, like, creativity extends also, there's the music industry and also writing. Fiona, can you share a little bit with us? We have some amazing writers. Ava's in the room. There's just some amazing artists in the room with us. Share a little bit with us why Substack as opposed to a major publication, and also maybe Hunter can join in the conversation as well.
Yeah. So a couple things, and then I want to kick it over to Hunter. But why Substack? So I think one thing that I touched on earlier is that idea of independence. That you know on Substack you own everything that you write. So that's your mailing list, your payment relationships. And I think that's really important sort of in this new reality, that what if you sort of flip the question, what's possible here is, you know, readers can fund and support writers that they love, and they can find any imaginable niche, any community, anything that's entertaining to them, they're curious about, and fund it and find it. And that's sort of like, we can build a future of that with more independent writers. And Hunter is this incredible example of this because, you know, she was a staff writer at Vulture up until really recently. She left her job to go independent and start a publication on Substack and publish it full time. It's called Hung Up. It's amazing. I really recommend it. She's brilliant and witty, and it's about movies and pop cultures. And Hunter, maybe you can share a little bit of your perspective about going independent and why you decided to do it.
Hunter, I'm a fan. I'm a fan girl. Love your work, Hunter.
Thank you. Sure. So I felt like I'd had a pretty traditional path in media, like working my way up from an editorial assistant to like a blogger to a staff writer. But ultimately, I think Substack gave me the opportunity not only to own my own work, which was important to me and something that I'd never had the opportunity to do before, but also just to have more control over my professional life and what I was working on and what I wasn't working on. And it's just, I'm obviously like, I'm very new on the platform, and I've only been like, my site has been live for about a week and a half now, but it's actually really incredible and inspiring, like the relationships that I can have with my readers. I'm on the internet all the time, but the volume of responses I would say to the stuff I'm writing now is, easily like 4 or 5 times what it was when I was like a staff writer at a publication, which is kind of a relationship that I'm very interested in cultivating and feel obviously like super grateful for. But it's really interesting to me as a writer to have this like level of intimacy and sort of FaceTime with people that are reading my work.
And I'd love to kick it over to Aminato So, who she's another writer on Substack. And just to kind of give you a little context, so Amina launched really recently as well. She has this brilliant publication called Creme de la Creme, and it's sort of about, cultural commentary. It features an advice column. She's going to launch an audio component as well. But one thing, Amina, that maybe you could speak to a little bit that was really interesting for me to hear is just this feeling of being a bit overwhelmed by social media and, what it feels like to kind of create this intentional space, sort of what Hunter's getting at too, like this relationship with your readers and the community that's forming around your work. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what that experience has been like.
Thanks, Fiona. Yeah, I have not had like a traditional media path. I've never worked at a publication before. In fact, I used to be a project manager at Google. And so my like coming into writing has been very circuitous. But the minute I decided to quit my tech job and go full time into making my podcast and writing, it was really apparent to me that the worker of the future, if you want to be a creator, it has to be someone who is has like multiple SKUs, like stock keeping units. So you have to have a place that you write. You should probably have a place, that you speak also, and you should be churning out like different kinds of products. And so that was the approach that I used. And I like have been really lucky in that I built this pretty big platform for myself, and which translated to like a large-ish following on social media. But what I had found in the last year is that it was really diminishing returns. Like I just do not appreciate that social media is just like one more place for people to interact with you. And I think that's just my nature as a like fairly anxious person. I also think that the larger the platform you have, the more overwhelming it is. Like some people can handle the like incoming that you get from like thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions. Like I am personally not built that way. And it was really starting to take a toll on my own creativity and on the way that I wanted to interact with the internet. And I think that Substack for me really provided me a place to slow down how I was producing content and also just be more intentional about it. There is something about email that is just like so much more intimate, and also means that you can decide how the traffic goes. And for me, I was like, I am a broadcaster, and so I would like for the traffic to go one way. I don't need like strangers like talking to me all day, which I know sounds like a not generous thing to say if you are a creative person. But I think that my philosophy about this is that the only thing that you owe strangers is the work that you give them. And I think that particularly if you are a woman who creates things, there is this desire to just know a little more about you and for you to be like some sort of oversharer. And I was really resisting that. And and Substack, I think because of how just easy it is, I don't have to manage an email mailing list. I don't have to worry about the tech of it all. It was just it was a big no-brainer for me. And I have to say, my publication has only been around for a couple of weeks. So far, it's fun. I don't remember the last time I had fun writing on the internet. And so much of that for me is about having the control that I have now. So, so far, so good.
Your work is amazing. I did check it out as well. So thank you for joining the conversation. So Smack, I got you. You're in. Smack, you got to
Yes,
unmic.
I'm here. How you
Hey,
doing? How's
brother.
everybody doing?
It took me a minute to
All
get
those,
you up, but I'm thrilled that you're on the platform with us today. So you're building a
yes.
lot of momentum around an underground art form whose community is just as important as the artists. So how does caffeine help you with that? Like, tell us a little bit about caffeine and your relationship with caffeine on the platform. And then also, if we have some time, and we do have time, I do want to talk about Volume 6. And you're going live, I
Okay.
think, next week on the broadcast. So I think people would
Yes,
love to
that's
hear about
correct.
that as well, Smack.
Yeah, well, my relationship with caffeine is a special, unique relationship,
Smack, I don't know why. I think we may be crashing the Clubhouse. I can't hear you. So Paul, I'm gonna bring you up so you can help us. Sorry. Paul, we can't hear Smack.
Hey.
I can't hear Smack.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay,
yeah,
great. Okay,
yeah.
thank you, Smack. Why don't you start over? Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, no worries. I'll go take a look, see if something's going on. Sorry about that, Felicia.
No,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, so we linked up with Caffeine just to give our fans in the rest of the world, an opportunity to have access to our content for free with their amazing streaming platform. So I think that the venture between us two is like a perfect marriage. But we also do have, our subscription-based model when it comes to our content as well, where we created a paywall. We create our own platform, and we have our own fans have a subscription platform where they can actually pay for the content as well. And we just had to get off of the major platforms like YouTube, because the monetization on a major platform are paying the creators like 0 cents off of the penny, where it don't even support you enough to continue to create the content that you are trying to produce. So I think that the marriage with us and Caffeine is a perfect fit. And, you know, we just try to create and control all of our content. So that's why we created our own subscription-based model when it comes to the URL.
Thank you for that, Smack. Ben, why don't you tell us why Caffeine partnered with URL and some of the highlights of the year?
Sure. Well, look, just to take a step back before I really get into that, for those that don't know me or the company very well, you know, we really believe that live broadcast television is becoming at glacial speed, like social and interactive, you know, much like a lot of media before it. You know, it'd be hard to imagine the next generation reading the newspaper at this point, because, you know, there's different format, different way of doing that now. It's social and interactive. And so we really wanted to come in and participate with people that want to make content for the next generation, whether you're a user-generated creator or whether you're, you know, someone like URL, which is really wanting to look for what's next. And so we have a studio and a distribution platform that can come in and help people really make incredible, you know, social interactive stuff that really leans into, I think, how the next generation wants to consume live television broadcasting. And with that, we have new ways of making money. And that's, you know, one of the things that Smack was talking about there is for, you know, all their live stuff, you know, we have a platform in a studio which allows them to take it to the next level, make money in new ways, and get it out to more people. And I think that, you know, it's a combination of you know, technology and then the studio and the content work, but really partnering with the culture of URL and being really, really sensitive to how you broadcast this out to the fans and give it to them in a new and fresh way, but something that's super authentic to them. You know, with another category that we were looking at, we were talking to people in the sort of snowboard action sports world, and, you know, I hear it's another world that I'm really passionate about. And I've heard the story over and over again of people taking their content to like ESPN and the big corporation trying to fit it into this corporate mold. You know, a lot of hoops you've got to jump through. They water it down, like the community sort of sniffs that, smells that straight away, and sees that it's, you know, not an authentic way of doing it. And so when you look at someone that's trying to produce, you know, new, fresh live broadcasting television content like Smack and the URL guys, there's not a lot of options. You can either go to YouTube and be lost in the sea of things there and not make, you know, much money, or try and get a network television deal through lots and lots of hoops and you know, trying to and basically sell out to your community, or you can partner up with us and we're going to do it like we do it with URL. And I think what we've been achieving with URL has been phenomenal. Just on Halloween this year, we had the biggest live stream on the internet on any platform in the United States. There was nothing bigger on Facebook or YouTube or anything. It was trending, you know, #2 on Twitter. So to see battle rap get that kind of thing, be that, you know, above UFC, above boxing on that night, above everything that was going on, was just phenomenal. So I'm fired up about it. I know we've got Beasley here as well, and Smack from URL, and they can also tell you more about it from their perspective. But that's why I'm really excited about the work we're doing with those guys.
Yeah, so far, this is Beasley. How are you, everybody? So far, it's been
Beasley, thanks for joining.
Oh, thank you for having me. So far, it's been a great experience. I think one of the key things that really makes our relationship work is that our audience is all about just comments immediately as things are happening. They're very interactive, and, you know, everything on Caffeine is in real time, so it's a great place for engagement. And I think that's kind of what's been pushing us to even higher levels of visibility since we've been working. And you know, next week we have one of our events coming up, which is going to be on live, so everybody make sure you check it out. It's going to be 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Caffeine platform. But it's been a great journey. But I think this is something that's going to expand. It's going to take over. It's going to be it's getting bigger and bigger with each show that we're doing. And you know, the goal here is really to be what UFC is to mixed martial arts. that's what we want to be to this art form, and that's what we've become. So
Thank you, Beasley. Ben Horowitz.
Oh, so I have a question for actually Stoute, and I see my cousin Michael Ovitz in here. So Michael too. I'd be very interested in your take on, as this develops, as we open the world to more creators and they retain ownership, like what can this mean for the future of the industry, and in particular, kind of wealth creation, the new set of moguls? What is that going to look like?
Michael, you go.
No, go ahead, Steve. I'll follow you.
Well, we're seeing, I can tell you one thing in the record business. I use an artist that we found. We found an artist. He uploaded a song on YouTube on December 27th. We found the song on January 3rd and distributed the song through United Masters under a 90-10 arrangement. 16-year-old artist. The song quickly, we took it, obviously YouTube, we gave it full distribution. Spotify,
90
Apple,
to the
etc.
artist.
And the song starts to accelerate. 90 to the artist, United Masters got 10. This December 27th, 16-year-old kid uploads a song. January 3rd, we find it and put it out. The major record companies do not want successful independent artists. It is the one thing that will stop their entire racket. And by June of that year, right? So this is 18, December 27th, 2018. We put the record out in January 19. By June of 19, a record label offered that same artist, or for one song, $8 million. 16-year-old kid. Why? Because they did not want him to have massive success as an independent artist. So they overpaid cash in order to stop him from continuing to grow as an independent artist. The same thing just recently, it's happening nonstop where they're overpaying, because if people start to see successful, very wealthy, independent artists continue to thrive, then it would be the demise of their industry. And because they see it happening so quickly, what they're doing now is they're going public. They're trying to get all the money off the table now because they see the writing on the wall. They see artists like Toby. They see artists coming up next, Russ, that are saying, I'm fiercely going to be independent. You're never going to be able to write me a check to tell me I don't own my music. That's never going to happen. And when that continues to hold, then that will be the spiral of the industry. And these artists will make more money than they could have ever made had they signed to a record company over the long term. So there will be seismic wealth creation as a result.
Ovitz? Thank you,
Thanks.
Steve.
Thanks, Felicia. It's tough to follow Steve, who's, articulate and so on the cutting edge. I will say, and Felicia, you outlined it at the beginning of the conversation. I mean, the way that the business developed starting in the 20s, in the 1920s and 30s, was the business itself, the creative world, was basically held hostage to a walled garden. And you laid it out nicely. When I got into the business originally, there were gatekeepers, and you had the studios, you had the record companies, you had the only 3 networks, believe it or not, and everything was commercial driven. It was almost impossible to get past the gatekeepers, and a lot of creative people fell victim to this. At CA, we started and pioneered this concept of trying to take over the power curve from the owner distributors, which were the studios and the networks and the record companies, and switch that curve to the creative community. Now, when we started, we didn't have the internet. And as a student of Mr. Horowitz and Mr. Andreessen, and the concept of the development and creation of the browser, and of the idea that everything has been created for complete distribution, it has now become possible for creative people to move into much better positions of leverage to be able to financially position themselves. So what Steve's doing is fantastic. Substack, Caffeine, and so many other companies that are allowing creative people to get their work forward. But the great thing about the internet and the way distribution is right now, if you have a great idea or great product, you can get it out there, and you have a much better chance of it getting discovered than you did in this all the way from the 20s up to the 80s or even into the early 90s of trying to get it past the gatekeepers.
Well,
And go ahead,
I'm
Steve.
sorry,
Were you going to say
Michael.
something? No,
Michael.
go ahead.
No, I'm super sorry. I'll let you finish. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was going to say was, you had to find a record company in the 70s, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, all the way through. You had to find a record company in order to find an audience. Now, an artist finds an audience before they actually find a record company.
Right.
So the record company comes late to the table. So why do they get a lion's share of the economics? Now, by the way, this is what Prince was saying in the 80s. And because he's eccentric, people thought he was out of his mind. He changed his name in order to get out of his recording contracts, because recording contracts own your name and likeness. So he literally had to change his name in order to bypass a contract. And Michael, I'm sure you know a lot about this, but Prince wrote Slave on his face in the middle of the economic boom of the music business, because it was the principles of it was wrong. And people ignored that. And of course, he was, like everything else he did artistically, way ahead of his time. Lastly, I got the name United Masters because of what Charlie Chaplin and those guys went through in the 20s in the film industry, where the studios boxed them out, and they built United Artists to fight the film industry and actually change laws around movie studios owning theaters as well as productions. And that was very important in helping break up the monopoly that the film industry had over talent. So I felt like the spirit of Charlie Chaplin, what Prince stood for, when we were building United Artists, it was really those brilliant minds that I looked to what they were writing the blueprint for to create the company that we have today.
Right. Well, Steve, you mentioned Prince. We were fortunate enough to be to represent him along with his managers, and he was truly the most extraordinarily gifted artist. And I will never forget when he called us with his managers and said that he was changing his name because he could not deal with the kind of editorial pressure that he was getting on his music. And coupled with that, he came to us with an idea to do a movie. And in those days, there was very little chance to get a film off the ground with a musical artist like that. And what we did is we put together a project where he owned everything, and then we took it to a distributor. And bear in mind, in those days, without distribution, you couldn't do anything. Today, not so. But when we put Purple Rain together, everyone said couldn't be done. No one would be interested. No one would distribute it. So it was a no. But when we came to distributors with a fully done script and music and an album that he put together all on his own, he invested his time, his energy into his own creativity. We were able to create a situation where he had ownership of his music as well as a substantial percentage of profits on the film. Today, that is actually easier to do than it was when we did this 30 years ago. It is much easier to do because of digital distribution. And frankly, if someone engaged your marketing company and they had a great idea, it's conceivable that just using the internet and Steve Stoute, you could proceed to put something out there without any company involved and own 100% of it. It's a different era right now.
Yeah, well, thank you. Toby, Toby is an independent artist that has worked with both our music distribution and branding opportunities, using corporate relationships to help underwrite activity that he's done that's helped push his commercial success even further. Toby, if you want to talk to that, that'd be cool.
I absolutely am in full agreement, and I think, well, let me just say with what you were saying earlier about this being an absolute wave for artists, and I think it's literally only a matter of time, and yeah, the situation that I have not set up for me, I'm telling you, like the industry is literally set up for perfectly for people who have a vision for what they want to do with their art.
Thank you, Toby. And thank you, Steve and Michael. I want to bring in Terry Crews, who's people think of you as like a great actor, but also you're a great writer and illustrator. What are your thoughts on kind of Substack? Can you hear me, Terry?
Yes, I can. Could you repeat could you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah. So, do you have any questions? Why don't we start off there, because you're an amazing writer and illustrator. I've seen your children's book. You do amazing work as well.
Well, in regards to creativity and in the future, the big thing with Warner Media putting all their movies online blew my mind the other day, because I just see the playing field evening especially for independents. Where do you guys see, when I look at Caffeine and the ability to broadcast, and all of a sudden you are top of the world instantly, with online streaming and the whole thing, do you really feel like this is the end of basically broadcast TV, or the kind of the black box that entertainment has, kind of kept from the normal crowds from joining, or the normal creative crowd from being top of the hill? I mean, where do you see this happening, and do you see it really evening out?
Pat, I'm happy to take a stab at that. Steve?
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael. Michael, go ahead. Yeah.
So Terry, I think you raised the question that everyone's talking about, in the theatrical side, and I'm just one opinion, but I think that streaming, what we've seen, and which has been amplified by this pandemic, is a complete change in viewer behavior and viewer patterns. I can't speak to listening, because I don't think that it's had as big an impact on that as it has, because that was changing geometrically already. But I think in the area of streaming and binge watching has pretty much put such pressure on commercial television that I don't know the number of years, but short of day and date television like sporting events, political issues, or news, streaming is really the master of entertainment. Now, that being said, I still feel, and not because I've loved the movie business, I feel strongly that people still want to get out and experience films in crowds, but I think the films will be either bigger or more personal and intimate, and they will be event driven and very, very many opportunities for theaters, but no longer back to where it started with 2 movies, a cartoon, and a newsreel. Today, it's going to be 1 movie, it's going to be special, and it's going to be that people want to get out of their house. But at the end of the day, clearly the Warner's move was made based on economics. And I think that going forward, we're going to still see, once the pandemic's over, a movie business, but a very, very changed movie business.
In the music equivalent to that is, Terry, the new artists now, because of what the record companies are seeing, are getting better deals than economically than Bruce Springsteen ever got, than Eminem ever got. There's artists you never heard of that have better deals, not because they want to do anything fair, because they're holding on to their dear lives to keep these kids coming through the funnel. So they're giving them deals that they never even gave some of the greatest artists of all time. Number 2 is the record business does something that's so, I believe, is unfair at its core, is they own your record, they own your music in perpetuity. So as a result of that, they still have Apple and Spotify particularly held hostage because, they want to be able to say that they have Dark Side of the Moon or Purple Rain or, these great albums are sitting on those platforms. And because of that, it's why Apple and Spotify can't do what Netflix is doing and make direct content, original content themselves. Because the record companies have an agreement with Spotify and Apple that says, if you compete against us in our business, then we will remove our catalog off of your platform. So Apple and Spotify can't directly sign artists because if they did that, they'll lose Purple Rain, Dark Side of the Moon, and Thriller. And this is the problem that these guys do. They are very, very smart at building a moat around their business, but that moat has been built off the artist's backs, not because of any creativity or some value that they add that is unique to the equation.
Steve, I want to follow up on that with another question. What do you see about the future of these blockchain?
Well,
Ujo and Emanate and the future of blockchain in regards to the music industry, because
well, I can tell you what I see. I see a very bright future for blockchain in the music industry, specifically because another thing that they do is, so there's so much music that's streamed, right? We know there's tons of music all over, there's 150,000 songs go up on Spotify and Apple Music a day. So just think about the volume of music that's up there. When those songs are streamed, there's so many different contractual arrangements that are not sorted, that these songs are streamed all over the world, and at the end of the day, they can't find who the rightful owner is. So what happens is, now get ready for this, Spotify and Apple, or Spotify, let's just use it as an example, will hold, let's say, $1.2 billion, they'll hold because they don't know which to pay. It just sits there. After a period of time, they release that money based on to the record companies based off of market share, and the record companies book that unpaid money as profits. These are facts. So with blockchain, obviously what would happen is every owner would be rightfully identified from the beginning, so that there would be no situation where you'd have these unpaid artists or unpaid musicians and contributors who never ever found out that their music was streamed. How would you even know if your song got streamed right now?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Svetlana is an incredible jazz singer. She has a question, I think, for you, Steve, as well. Svetlana, you got to unmute your mic. Svetlana.
Yes. if I could only know how to use technology, how ironic for this conversation.
Why don't you tell people a little bit about your background? Like I know you, but let's.
Sure. Well, I'm a jazz artist. I'm here in New York. I lead a band. I record my albums, using the money I make playing bar mitzvahs and weddings. I did create a crowdfunding thing for my last album. Unfortunately, it was with Pledge Music that went out of business and kept all the money. So that also happened. Um, with the pandemic, onset of the pandemic, jazz in particular is it's kind of like an old dinosaur in some ways, in that it costs a lot of money to record a good album. So jazz artists don't put out a single a week or a single a month. Jazz artists, sit there and work on their album for a year and then record 12 tunes and then move on to the next, though we may be releasing it single at a time in preparation to full launch. I mean, we see jazz idols, passing away in poverty. We're, asked to contribute to various campaigns to subsidize their medical expenses. Just last week, we saw a major jazz club in New York, the Jazz Standard, go out of business. So all of that to say, I mean, we still do it. We love what we do. We're not going to stop, but it's a very definitely tough genre and subgenre to be in, both in terms of streaming, and in terms of touring. It's even more difficult to make money these days. I'm wondering if you guys, Steve or Michael, if you guys have perspective on the genre and how these models that you are building are or are not applicable to what it is that we do.
So, you know, live recordings, like jazz music specifically, or when you have bands coming in, they are more expensive to record.
Yep.
So therefore, the startup cost, the cost of entry is much higher. That is a fact, and those artists rely on touring to make their money, and this is certainly not the time, to be touring or anything like that. So it does become problematic with jazz artists specifically, because of the amount of money you need to start up, and know, that's where record companies or can come in and lend that support. But I do believe that what is it, the Blue Note? What's don't they have, there's a label, right? It's a jazz label.
Right.
It's an
It's
independent
both a
jazz label.
club and a jazz label.
Hello?
Correct. It's both of those
Hello?
things. Yes.
And a jazz label, yeah. Yeah, the jazz label aspect of it is actually it's independent. So they do have, there's a bit of independence of that system was built in the genre of jazz, certainly prior to it being built in hip hop and other art forms. But there is a long way to go. So I understand that specifically the problem that you put forth right there requires more money than hip hop per se to get started, and it's the next step for us is to be able to make microloans to an artist like you, so that you can go, afford those startup costs and still own your works, versus being forced to sign a record deal because that's the only way you can get the money to finance your works. Um, that is on the product roadmap for us, to be able to make those kind of bets and make those microloans to artists, so that nobody um, is prevented from joining the independent movement because of a lack of funds to start the recording process.
That is very exciting to hear, and I think it's goes frankly in jazz in sub industry, this little sector, even further, because people in the jazz world view record labels really almost like a PR machine, because even if we look at, streaming services like Spotify or social media, uh, even those smaller independent jazz labels like Mac Avenue or Sony Masterworks, the minute the artist is signed, they're on the path, to be part of Spotify playlists, and their streaming goes up, and um, it's really a lot of handshakes behind the scenes that really truly independent artists have no sort of hand in. Um, so I think the idea of having an advocate, whether it's a label or a platform such as United Masters, is even more exciting than the financial part of it.
Well, I appreciate that, and we certainly we're seeing a lot of this. This is a lot of this sort of where you have to record multiple musicians' music. They're saying, gospel artists are saying, look, we want to be independent, but our startup cost is too high, and that's one of the things that we have to solve, and we are going to solve because it's very important. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's funny. We just dropped Shaka. He had a question. He's working on getting back in. Hammer, do you want to join in? Do you have any questions?
I don't have a question per se. I think it's great information, and it is indicative of the future of all creatives having the lion's share ownership of their product, of their works and what they create. And I just see the short distance. There'll be a few obstacles. Like Steve said earlier, they're going to fight back, and they got some great tools to fight back with, and they got a big war chest. One thing with artists in this particular case, Steve, how much of a role does radio continue to play as far as moving the units? How important is radio still? And I know the one important aspect of radio that has been like it's one of the last bullets in the gun of the majors. And I know exactly the numbers and how important is the value proposition in a song on the radio still worth it today. And by the way, I know that's tiered. So if we talking, Steve's clients, if you're talking Beyonce or any branded artist, you don't need it. You don't even need to waste that money. You just drop and your fan base react. But if you go down a few levels, obviously mid-tier artists, they still need radio. Radio was is still important, but it may not be as important as we think if you talk about, again, the split that you spoke of earlier. So if that radio money is going to be recouped as a part of the marketing cost, it makes it a different proposition. So I just like to get your feedback on the radio portion, specifically the influence of radio and how much is important for moving units and so forth and so on.
No problem. Hammer, that's a great question because that question actually leads to the next question. Well, if you're independent, why do you have a hard time getting on radio? But if you sign to a record company, you have an easier time getting on radio, right? I mean,
we know the answer to that.
I know the answer to that, which is what I want everybody here to know. It's because it's crooked. The record companies pay the radio stations via brown bags of money in order to play their records. And there's been laws against this, but yet it still continues today. So when you can give an independent promoter, which is what they call these people who go up to radio stations, you give him $200,000 and he can guarantee you that he's going to make your song top 5 at radio. It's because they're paying all the disc jockeys, they're paying the head of the station. It's organized crime to play that. And if you're an independent artist, you don't have that. You don't even have the connection. Even if you had the money, you can't even get in there to do that. So that's been another one of the moats that record companies have had, which is radio. But to hammer to your question specifically as to its influence, radio has lost its influence dramatically because, you see, radio relies on local advertising primarily. It relies on advertising. and they got to play the hits. If they don't play the hits at radio, kids tune out. The problem is the hits are not starting at radio. The hits are starting on Apple and Spotify and SoundCloud and DatPiff and other places. So as a result of that, radio is still getting the songs late. Radio had an advantage. If they had a new song that came out by an artist like Beyonce, yeah, fine, they'll play that immediately. But when there's a song that they have to wait to find out it's a hit, it has to test, it has to work. By the time it becomes a smash, 10 weeks later, kids on Spotify and Apple listen to that song thousands of times. So radio, we used to lead the conversation. Now they're behind, basically playing songs that already have been established as hits. And the reason why radio has to do that is because they have to play hits in order to keep up their audience to make that advertising revenue. So radio's in a tough spot. Radio's getting crushed behind this. Crushed because they're no longer they're no longer the only game in town, or even the game in town that matters most at all to get your records across. You'd much rather have your song on Spotify and Apple. Why? Because not only does it promote you as an artist, but they also pay you. You get paid per stream. When your song plays on the radio, you don't get shit. You get some public performance money, that's nothing. But when Spotify and Apple play you, they pay you. So it's promotion plus payment. So radio is losing behind that economic model as well.
And a follow-up to that, Steve, since we're just talking about where the records break, the records actually break, and again, you breathe in this every day. So TikTok is actually the leader in breaking records right now. So TikTok is really breaking records, and its closest competitor is Triller, which Triller cut a deal recently with all labels. The labels actually have equity stakes in Triller as well. So that's going to be, that type of format, the dance oriented, TikTok, Triller type videos are going to continue to break records. Has United Masters formed a great relationship with either one of those platforms?
I mean, we developed with I believe that TikTok and social media is the new MTV. You're damn right we did, because it's important. In fact, we announced in August, we have a deal with TikTok in which when you're on TikTok, you can now go from uploading your clip on TikTok and then turning it into and distributing right from TikTok to Apple and Spotify so that you can get the song distributed globally and paid. That was a very important breakthrough partnership for us that caused a lot of fits at record companies. Ben knows all about this. I mean, this took a lot of time to get done, and it was a certain period window to get through to get that done. I've spent time with the guys at Instagram. I've spent time with the guys with Jack Dorsey and discussed this in detail, that they are actually the solve for the music business tomorrow. And part of my job is to keep pushing them, because if I get them all in on this, TikTok is all in on it. If I get the Instagram and Jack Dorsey in on it full tilt, then the record companies would lose their promotional lock that they have with radio and those other things, because people will stop relying on that because they realize their socials is where the money's at anyway. That's their biggest promotional tool. The best marketer of an artist is the artist themselves, and that's what those tools provide them.
Hammer, everybody wanted to stop that deal, including Donald Trump.
Ben, you can't be disclosing everything in the clubhouse like that. Please.
Hey,
Don't go there, please. Let's add in Cannon. Cannon.
Yeah, Felicia, I just want to say, first of all, man, this has been very educational for myself, and I'm sure everyone else. One of the big elephants in the room when you start talking about artists is that marketing is inversely correlated with distribution. And one thing that really proved that is that a recent study said that 1% of all the streams, basically from Spotify, constitute 99% of the artists. So it means basically that the big portion of the streams, in fact, I'm sorry, I just said that wrong. It basically is the inverse, that 1% of all the artists, meaning the biggest artists on the planet, generate 90% of all music streams. So the problem isn't getting on these platforms. The problem isn't getting distribution. You can get distribution, but can you get actually in the mind share of the people who actually subscribe to those distributors? And so, to Steve's point, independent of the corruption, the reason why the corruption takes place is because it's so difficult to get placement on these playlists, on all of those things. And I really feel like one of the things that we have to really push as an industry is how skilled the marketers are for the new artists and how fair a price those artists are paying for marketing. Because many times, those other 99% of the artists are actually subsidizing the marketing for the big ones because it's all in a pool.
Stoute?
Felicia,
Yes.
I know you can't see everybody that's in the room right now, but I think we would be amiss if we didn't see that Ava is in the room, and I wanted to get her perspective if on what she sees with all this as well. Fantastic leader.
Ava, do you want to join? I wanted to be sensitive and give you kind of your privacy and not ask you questions, but if you want to join, I'm always happy to hear your voice.
Hey, Felicia, how you doing? Hi, everyone.
Hey, it's good to see you. Welcome to the clubhouse.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's my first time in your room, so it's fantastic. No, as I've been listening, I've been thinking about, my industry, the film and TV industry, and how I started in the industry, self-distributing my work, owning my films. So I own all of my early films. But once I started working in the studio system, obviously, larger budgets that are being given you by the studio, no ownership, and the whole marketing apparatus. And, I think that we're not far from a place where, and I'm looking at it really closely, where filmmakers will be able to, kind of take hold of that independent film distribution model that we did back in the day in theaters and kind of taking our films, to theater by theater. I think there are incredible opportunities with streaming, and that eventually there will be a way, and it's closer than we think, for filmmakers to stream with the full muscularity of a Netflix, of a Amazon Prime. It's in the cards. It's coming, and so it's something to get ready for. But on the other hand, as I'm thinking about everyone's industries, one of the things that really sticks out to me that we're not discussing when it comes to independence and monetization, and the traditional walls collapsing across all of the industries, are the interlocking systems that are a part of these industries' success and that are fed by these industries, and that we are fed by as artists and as human beings, which is achievement and accolade. And that as we think about, how to untether ourselves from these kind of monetization systems that are traditional and kind of, these traditional walls that have been put up, entrenched in that are the ways in which we as artists feel like we have achieved. And that goes beyond money. That goes to awards, that goes to reviews, that goes to all of the things that make artists, whether it's a filmmaker or a musician, feel like they've made it, are very tightly wound up in traditional distribution. So for example, the ways in which you are eligible for certain awards, the number of theaters you have to play in, the kinds of platforms you have to play in, even to be, eligible to be considered for an Oscar, an Emmy. I don't know as much about music at all, so I don't know what that is for Grammys. But how many theaters you have to play in traditionally to get to garner that New York Times review, to garner that the attention from I don't know, a Good Morning America or whatever. All of the press accolades is tied up in traditional distribution. So as we talk about it, I think, I'd be really interested for the panel to speak to some of these other cultural um, um, cultural pieces of the puzzle that are not incidental or tangential to distribution, but actually are fed by it and also feed it. And that these are also things we have to think about if we're talking about true independence from these systems.
Wow, Ava, that was a dope ass question. Ovitz or Stout, can you guys jump in? And thank you, Ava.
Thank you. Thanks, sis.
Michael or Steve?
Ava, that's great. Ava, you said something.
So, Steve, hold on. We're going to have to back you up because we didn't hear you. Can you rewind that, you and Michael? So, Steve, can you repeat what you said? We're kind of crashing the system.
Hey, while Steve is getting together, I just want to say this is my first time on Clubhouse, and if Steve and Ava gonna be talking like this, I'm in.
Right? Yeah, that was a dope ass question. Steve, we can't hear you. Paul, can you help us fix the sound, please? Rohan? Okay, Paul, I'm bringing you up. Sorry, everyone. We're still in beta.
I'm not sure. I don't know if it's an issue with Steve's network or something else, but we'll take a look at it.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
So, Steve, we're going to jump to Michael because we didn't hear you, but we do want to hear what you have to say. So, Michael?
Felicia, I apologize, but a lot of what Ava was saying cut out on my side. So could you reframe the question just in it? I mean, I only got bits and pieces of it.
Ava, can you jump back in, please?
Just reframe it and we can talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, in brief, I said that I feel like it a part of a responsible conversation about, independence and independent distribution is to really talk about the cultural systems that are attached to distribution, that are fed by it and that feed it, including awards, accolades, achievement, press. I gave the example as a filmmaker of the number of theaters, the streaming capacity that one has to have to be eligible for an Oscar or an Emmy. As gosh, even an Independent Spirit Award has certain thresholds about, how widely something needs to be seen or can be seen in order to be considered for certain categories. I don't know what that means for Grammys or Tonys, but I bring it up because, while some of us do a lot of work to divest ourselves of the need for achievement and awards, for many young artists, that is, they want to walk those red carpets. You know what I mean? They want to, they want the premiere. They want the Grammy nod. They want the platinum record. They want all those things. And I think that there are larger cultural conversations around this business piece that need to be addressed in order to really help folks understand, what being independent truly means, beyond just a larger check at the end of the day. I mean, that's significant, but it's tied to other things.
Right. I think that it's a very poignant question and thought. And the good news is we're in the middle of change, geometric change. And the business is going through a change from everything, and what Steve was talking about is highlighted by this. Everything from, am I coming through here, Felicia? Because I'm getting a ton of static.
No, I got you. I have the mutes on.
Okay. Everything originally from day one in the business was based on money. in everything was based on money, and that included all forms of creativity. Whether you were a recording artist, a filmmaker, you did television, you wrote books, everything was predicated. How do you make money? How do the production distribution entities or the big record companies, how do they make money? And to that point, Steve raised a really excellent thought, which is that the record companies now see the writing on the wall, and they are throwing money all over the place. But we're seeing the same thing in the competitive landscape of the creative community. We're also seeing at the same time a smaller audience for all of the awards ceremonies that are broadcast. It's fascinating to me that every year the Nielsen ratings go down for all of the awards except the Grammys, but the Grammys have always been more of an entertainment spectacle as much as an awards show. So I'm not a huge believer in awards as much as I am in celebrating creative people and creativity, which I think the award show should lean a little more towards. They should widen. But what we're seeing also is a change in rules. With the advance of streaming services, you saw this, and it started early on, but a good example of it was Scorsese's picture on Netflix, which was a $150 million theatrical release, streamed, but a substantial portion of the negotiation on the movie with Netflix was, how does this qualify for an Academy Award? And therefore, they had to put it in theaters. Being a member of the Academy, I'm reading all of the statements that are coming out on the changes that they're envisioning, and it goes right to the heart of your question. What is eligible? And that's really what's being discussed right now. So I think that the change in the air in all aspects is a positive, and a positive for creative people. I don't think that the power of distribution is going to win the day. I think the way we're seeing it go is it's moving to the creative community, which I think is really critical.
Just to finish that point, Michael, and as it relates to music, like the Grammys, I had written a letter in 2011 about the flawed Grammy system, and their goal, their changing of the goal every time they feel like it, in order to satisfy. They have a commercial need of a broadcast show that's entertaining, and they have these artists believing that they are going to get fairly nominated when they perform or be a part of it, and yet they use their names to get people to watch a show and then don't reward them. That's sort of what their MO is all about. And when I wrote that letter, what I found out was a lot of artists called me in the background. I can't tell you, I mean, artists I've never met before personally would tell me how bad they wanted to boycott the Grammys, but yet they couldn't boycott the Grammys because it was something they grew up dreaming about as a kid. So they were so locked into this idea, but yet wanted it to change dramatically. And what we've seen over the years is still no change. Just the fact that they want these great artists to perform, but then, use their name to promote the show and then put the camera on them and just basically show them losing. They did it to Jay-Z 2 years ago. They gave him every award, you could give him a nominated, and then sat there and had him put the camera on him, but he lost 8 times. But they've done this to everybody. This is not a new idea. They've done it to Eminem. They've done it to Kanye West. They've done it, for many, many years. In fact, I tell Nas, one of my great friends, he should be very, very happy because, Bob Marley had never won a Grammy, and Biggie has never won a Grammy, and Nas, you should never want to win a Grammy because, great artist has never gotten that award. But that's probably the biggest thing. That's probably the biggest hurdle, is to get people past these awards, specifically that award, as a way of feeling that validated by the record company system. With that said, the connection on my end is really going in and out. It's bad. I hope you guys heard me. I would like to give my emails to everyone on this thing. If there's any artists or people interested in knowing more about sort of the music aspect of independence, please email me directly, steve.stoute@unitedmasters.com. And I will be glad to answer any question on this because this has been, a passion of mine. And I appreciate Felicia and Ben for having me on tonight's call.
Thank you, Steve. That was very generous of you. Thank you. That's very nice. Shaka wanted to chime in. Shaka?
Hey, Felicia, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. So most of what I want to share is really directed toward Fiona and Substack. Fiona, just some context. I'm a writer who's had, success in long form writing, but didn't start off that way. I originally hustled, books out the trunk of my car and just kind of navigated my way, and then ended up with, a mainstream distribution deal and publishing deal. But I was able to retain my rights because I had built so much equity into my work, through the independent lens. And I guess my question is, with Substack, what does the future look like for long form writers who've built an audience and who may not want to go back through that mainstream distribution route or publishing deal or what have you? And what does that look like in regards to being able to pull that audience over, from a long form standpoint? And, in my experience, I have like several books that I haven't released yet, and I've been very intentional about holding those books off because there's no urgency on my end. I just want to make sure that when they are presented to the world, that they're presented in the right way. But also, these books are so special and so sacred because these were the first books I wrote while I was incarcerated. And I think that, some of the most important work that I wrote, with the exception of the new book that'll be coming, shameless plug there. But yeah, what does that future look like in terms of long form with Substack?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and really glad to hear about your publishing experience a bit. I think long form is really interesting for Substack because, particularly if you think about a book and actually releasing it, long form essays, chapters, sort of like week over week. So if you imagine that happening on Substack, week over week, you could actually get your readers subscribing to you. And then you know exactly, okay, who are your readers? And they're there in one place, kind of following along on this journey. And, and paying you directly for your work. One of the things that I think about with traditional publishing is, in some cases, it sounds like this wasn't your experience, but the publishing houses might, own that newsletter of yours and that mailing list. And in this model in Substack, you can kind of own those things yourself, have your readers subscribe to you, and sort of release your long form, release discourse, and actually host discussions along the way, and sort of build a community around your work as you're writing. And I'm curious to actually kind of punt this question a little bit over to Hunter and Amina. Aminato has, you wrote a book really recently called Big Friendship, and you're also publishing on Substack. And so maybe you have some thoughts about how you've made sense of that.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to publishing a book, there is, there is the issue of format fetishism that comes to mind. It's like reading on the internet is very different than reading a physical object. And I think that is very different. That is a really hard hurdle to overcome. So that said, some people are definitely finding a lot of success in self-publishing, and the mechanics of that are different. I find that people, especially who publish romance novels, that is a genre that is thriving in self-publishing. That said, if you are publishing at a big five publisher, as they're called, well, I guess now they're big four because Simon & Schuster just got absorbed by Random House. But the deal is honestly that you can own a lot of that work. As far as I'm concerned, with my book, I own almost all of the ancillary rights to it. And the people that you're actually contending with when you are having the fight of, ownership is not the publisher. It's actually the literary agents who represent you, because they're the ones that want to get in on that action. So I think that when it comes to books, I think that it's a little more complicated than, oh, is there going to be like a website that will allow you to publish long form? Sure, that's possible. But to me, the question is, will audiences, will people do that? I know that I struggle even with, there's a kind of book that I can read on a Kindle, but like when it comes to like people who actually read and buy books, that's a different question. I think something that people don't also realize is that the universe of book buyers is it's actually like quite small when you look at what the lists are. I found Ava's comment about awards like so interesting, because in publishing, people also chase like the New York Times bestseller list like it is some holy grail. And I will say, as someone who has been on that list, that it's obviously like a nice accolade. But the truth is that to get on that list in a week, you need to sell somewhere around 5 to 10,000 books. That is not a lot of books, but also truly people do not read that much. And so I find that, awards, while they are exciting or, they signify some sort of success, that if you are someone who is like very serious about your craft, it's good to like put that into perspective also, because awards are really nice, but in my experience, they do not pay. And, even the like success and the accolades that you get from it, I think it's like very dubious whether they actually like translate into more money for your work, at least in books. And I'm willing to be wrong about that. And the last thing that I will say, that's something that strikes me about all of these conversations across all of these different industries. For the thing that strikes me the most is how much of this information is gatekept. When I think about the reason that I think I was able to like make a living as a writer is because this information was something that I had sought out a long time ago, and I think that it is kind of a fluke also that I just knew to keep a closer eye on my contracts. I knew where to like push and where to ask for more. But that is just not true of most people. And, the conversation about music was so interesting because it is so like, it is like a really predatory system. And the only way that we can all free ourselves of that predatory system is by being more transparent about every single mechanism that enables success. And so, like gatekeeping information or not telling people like, that like, hi, like here's how you make it onto this list, or here is how the Grammys like actually works, or here is what this award is about, or here is what you should look out for on your contracts, is doing a big disservice to like young people who want to break into our industries, and it is doing a big disservice to us and to our colleagues as well. And so I just want to see a more robust conversation around wages, around contracts, and really coming from like a place of generosity, because it is the only way to make sure that people do not get taken advantage of.
Hunter?
I think, actually really said it all. The thing that was important to me about coming to Substack and moving into a place of like independent publishing is that I did feel like I had a more control over my writing, of course, and my work, but also I could have the opportunity to, I don't know, be more transparent about like my process and about, what works for me and what doesn't. I'm like feel lucky, but also stressed that a lot of like young writers follow me, ask me for advice a lot. And that's something that like I think I want to build into my publication, is like how to really pay it forward, and also how to like spread opportunities to other young writers, especially about, entertainment and pop culture, which is like what I'm focused on and what's really important to me.
Thank you. Thank both of you guys. There are a few questions. I know Squint would like to speak, and also Ryan Leslie. So who wants to go first? And then we'll take some questions, Marvin, that you're getting from the audience. Marvin, do you want to give people your handle so they can send you more questions and comments?
Yeah, sure. A lot of the questions have been answered just organically, but if folks have questions, please direct message me at Marvin K. White, MarvinKWhite, on Twitter.
Thank you for that, brother. Ryan, Leslie, or Squint? Who wants to go next?
I'll go.
Okay.
I have a question, I guess, and I guess it's more centered toward Ava. Maybe you can help with this. Like, I